Welcome everyone to another mega time-lapse. This is my third seasonal dragon video featuring the fall or autumn dragon. If you haven't seen the spring and summer dragons, I do have videos of those as well. But as for this scene, it's going to be mostly landscape. Even though there is a big dragon featured in it, there's a lot of landscape that needs to thoughtfully be planned out. I used a lot of Terragen from the Archeon plugin to create this, as well as various brushes from World Edit to refine different edges. I'm trying to keep the land as shallow as possible while not being too flat, as long as I'm maximizing the amount of space above it for the rest of the build. Oh, did I not mention the very quick concept art I made for this build? Well, there it is. So I have a plan and I need to stick to it. For now, this terrain is going to remain a bit dull and boring, but I mostly need it here to help me get a sense of scale. Next, I'm going to start building the wyvern, which is a type of dragon. I'm always tempted to make my builds as big as they can possibly be, but for this particular build, I have to account for all the various trees that I will eventually be adding, and I want to make sure there is headroom above the dragon so the trees can be taller. Once I'm satisfied with the proportions and the scale, then I can clean up the model, typically with basic brushes and by hand. When it comes to organics, there is no better way than smoothing things by hand. Typically with my organics, I find it easier to shape the head first. Since the head usually has the most detail, I want to make sure that that looks good at whatever scale I decide. Then I can more easily adjust the proportions of the body to match. I was trying to think of ways to make this dragon a bit more unique than the ones I've done in the past, so I experimented with these little armor-like plates along the neck, and while they look alright, they did take me a bit to get right. But the rest of the dragon is pretty simple and just smooth shapes everywhere. There's more to smoothing though than just making smooth shapes all around. You also have to think about any sharp edges that might appear in a model. And of course, some of the more detailed parts like the feet need to be done by hand because they're too small for anything else. This is a side note and completely unrelated to the video, but I try my best with the narration to explain my process when building. I'm wondering if you like all that explanation over the visual of the time-lapse itself. I certainly enjoy talking about it. In fact, I have to condense it quite a bit to match the footage that I'm showing. I'm just curious if you actually enjoy listening to it. I've never tried getting feedback like that before, so I thought I would this time. I used the loft tool from Archeon to create the wings. It took me a few tries to get it right. They probably could have been a bit bigger, but overall, they look pretty good. I styled the tail in a way that looks like a leaf, and it's one of the better parts of the build when it's colored. The other very whimsical thing I wanted for this dragon was to give it antlers. I thought it would fit well in a forest autumn scene. Then with the added spikes going down the back, I think the shaping of the dragon is good enough. For the colors of this dragon, I was trying to keep it in between brown and orange, although it tended to be more brown overall just because I have more brown blocks to build with. Most of the orange blocks in Minecraft are way too bright. It was a struggle trying to keep a consistent color scheme on the dragon while also adding some interesting textures. I stuck mostly with basic gradients because they are the easiest, the only problem being it makes some parts look a bit too smooth, but I was trying to avoid the scale texturing method that I've done for the previous dragons. I wanted this one to be different. The wings are such a big part of the dragon that I wasn't sure how to color them at first until I finally settled on this dark brown, almost going into black color. I wasn't planning on having it go that dark originally, but I think it works out because it does contrast the body very nicely. The dragon may be done, but I still have a long way to go. Now I need to build an entire forest environment around the whole thing. And if you know anything about building trees, big or small, They are very time consuming, and I was trying to make as many unique tree designs as I could stand to build. My process for making these trees is to use the spike tool from Archeon or the curve tool from World Edit, and use those to make the trunk and branches of the tree. Then I build by hand a bunch of various leaf assets off to the side. At first I was experimenting with different shapes and colors of leaves. I'll take each of these leaf clusters and save it as a schematic, and then bind it to a schematic brush, which allows me to then paste them randomly around on the branches. Even with this efficient process, one of these trees takes me anywhere from 1 to 3 hours, depending on how much prep work was done and how complex the texturing is. After building my first 3 trees, which were complete experiments, I decided they didn't fit the scene quite like I was hoping. Then I had the brilliant idea to try a birch tree. I thought the white bark would contrast the scene very well, and I wanted to see how good of a birch tree I could make. This was my first attempt at doing a birch tree at this scale, and I fell in love with it instantly. In fact, I liked it so much, I had to make at least 3 more. I made 8 of these giant trees in total, but only ended up using 6 of them and repeated some of them on the scene, because 2 of the first ones I made just didn't fit quite right. Don't be afraid to redo parts of your work if you're not fully satisfied. One of 2 things could happen: either you make something better or make something worse. Either way, you've learned something. But trees alone do not make a forest. So then it was time to build some bushes, using the same process as the trees, except this time I'm using fences as the stems, or whatever you call those, of the bush. And I used a schematic brush again to paste all the leaf assets in. This time I wasn't as careful if they merged into each other because it's supposed to look a bit messy. Once I had several versions of those, I think I'm finally ready to paste some of these into the scene. Before I paste anything else in, I need to paste in some boulders. That is a necessity to any landscape build. Then I paste in all the things, including trees, bushes, and some new leaf assets just for the ground. It was all coming together except for one thing that bothered me. The trees were not tall enough compared to the dragon. They were supposed to be much taller than the dragon, but I had run out of build height. I know I do have the option to extend the build height beyond the default setting, but I do like to keep these builds as vanilla as possible and look at the limited world height as a challenge more than a hindrance. Imagine me doing this with 1,000 blocks of world height. I would never get it done. Continuing on, I did texture the ground using various noise patterns. And finally, I can add the water in the center of the build. I did this with Loft, and it really made the build come together. This blue color is so refreshing after building with so many browns. Oh yeah, then I added a couple animals to the scene because I felt obligated to at this point, even though you're not really going to see them unless I zoom in really close, but here they are. I could have added more, but at this point I think I was ready for the build to be done, and done it is. Let me know what you think and check out my 360 render of it at the end of the video. Also, if you're interested, I've got loads more of these mega builds on my channel for you to check out. Thanks for watching!